The sky has been a bruise-colored haze for months, maybe years. It's hard to tell anymore. Once, it would shift from soft morning blue to molten gold at sunset. Now, it hovers in a perpetual choking orange, thick with smoke from fires that never seem to end, and ash drifting like snow over everything. The sun hangs weak and distorted, a pale disk barely piercing the haze, casting a sickly light over the ruins below. Streets that were once bustling arteries of life now lie fractured and silent, littered with the skeletons of vehicles, toppled streetlights, and rubble from buildings long collapsed. Asphalt curls and cracks under the relentless heat, forming jagged fissures that swallow debris whole. Concrete monuments lean at impossible angles, their surfaces scarred and blackened by fire or acid rain. Rust creeps across metal frames like veins, relentless, unstoppable. Rivers and lakes, the lifeblood of the world, have betrayed us. Some have dried into cracked, dust-choked beds, their channels twisted and barren. Others run black and sluggish, choked with chemicals, sewage, and the debris of abandoned cities. The few pools of water that remain are treated as treasure, fiercely guarded, often the center of violent conflict among desperate survivors. Forests are mostly gone. The few that remain are skeletal, trunks blackened, branches bare, leaves turned to brittle ash. Lightning strikes ignite fires that race across the barren lands, feeding on dead wood and dry underbrush, leaving the horizon blurred with smoke. Even the wind seems hostile, whipping dust and embers into the eyes and lungs of anyone daring to walk the open terrain. Civilization as we knew it is gone. Governments have collapsed. Laws and institutions have crumbled under the weight of disaster and human desperation. There is no police, no emergency services, no authority to maintain order. Instead, the landscape is ruled by scavengers, marauders, and small bands of survivors who cling together for protection, resources, or the thin thread of hope that anyone else might be sane enough to trust. Entire towns have been emptied overnight, abandoned or violently overrun by those driven mad with hunger, fear, or the virus that heightens aggression. Signs of the old world linger only as ghostly reminders. A library stripped bare, a playground overtaken by weeds, a gas station with pumps still jutting from the ground, but no fuel to flow. Highways disappear into rubble. Bridges hang like broken teeth over rivers long since shrunk to trickles. Schools, hospitals, and government buildings are gutted shells, their windows shattered, doors hanging from rusted hinges. Inside, dust coats everything, and silence reigns where once laughter, arguments, and human life filled the air. Survivors move in shadows, avoiding both the elements and each other. Some scavengers are ruthless, attacking anyone they perceive as weak. Others cling to small codes of honor, forming fragile communities that band together against the unending threat. The virus has made human contact a gamble. A friendly face could turn into a predator within moments. Trust has become the rarest currency, and it is spent only with extreme caution. Even the wildlife has changed. Birds move in tight, intelligent flocks, scavenging anything they can. Rats and other small animals scurry through debris, bold enough to approach humans only when hunger overpowers caution. Predators that once kept the ecosystem balanced are gone or mutated by scarcity, turning the few remaining animals into strange, desperate versions of themselves. The air itself is oppressive, heavy with ash, chemical smoke, and the lingering stench of decay. Breathing is an effort. Every inhale is a gamble against coughs, infections, and the slow accumulation of disease. The few machines that still run, generators, old vehicles, spit soot into the sky, contributing further to the choking smog. Every day is a calculation: how to move, where to find water, when to hide, whom to avoid. There is no certainty, only survival, moment by moment. The horizon is a constant threat of fire, storm, or human aggression. The remnants of humanity cling to the ruins, scavenging scraps from a world that once provided freely. And yet, amidst the devastation, tiny signs of persistence remain. A sprout emerging from cracked concrete, a hidden stream untouched by the worst of humanity's collapse, or the faint glimmer of someone else's fire in the distance. The world has shrunk in on itself. Everything familiar has changed beyond recognition. Cities, towns, rivers, and forests, the landmarks of memory, are gone. What remains is raw, elemental, and merciless. The past exists only in stories, in memories, in radio signals that carry voices like mine into the empty darkness, hoping to reach ears still alive somewhere out there. I am Miles Harrington. That name feels more like a memory than reality. Once it was attached to a man with a family, a home, a predictable life. Now it belongs to someone who survives day by day, a shadow moving through the ruins, speaking into a radio microphone that crackles with static, hoping someone, anyone, is listening. That voice is all I have left of connection, the faintest tether to a world that once made sense. I live in what remains of a small town that the river swallowed years ago, long before the virus turned people into predators. My shelter is a gutted gas station at the edge of the cracked main street, surrounded by the skeletons of burned cars and the rusting frames of homes. I've barricaded it with wood scavenged from neighboring houses, metal sheets from collapsed stores, and whatever I could carry without drawing attention. Every wall is reinforced, every window covered with old tarps and metal scraps. I sleep lightly, one eye always on the shadows, listening for movement, listening for screams that can turn a quiet night into a massacre. Water is collected in barrels from the rare rainfall or scavenged from the remnants of municipal pipelines that still trickle. I carry a small filtration system scavenged from a sporting goods store, but it is old and unreliable. Food is a matter of careful planning. I hunt small animals, scavenge the abandoned houses, and ration every scrap. Once a week, I take the risk to explore further, knowing the virus could have claimed any living thing I encounter. Even the wind feels dangerous now. It carries more than dust. It carries infection, aggression, the unpredictability of a world gone mad. Every morning begins with the same ritual: checking my traps, inspecting the barricades, tuning the radio to catch fragments of human life. I speak into the microphone, my words spilling into the void. I do not know who listens. Maybe no one. Yet I continue. Someone might hear me. Someone might still be out there searching for another human, clinging to the same fragile hope. I keep moving because if I stop, if I allow despair to root in my chest, the world will swallow me whole. Survival is a calculus of small actions. I memorize the streets of ruined towns, the locations of water and food, the safe routes through ash-choked forests. I've learned to listen to the wind, to read the clouds, to anticipate storms. I know the patterns of the infected, the flare-ups of aggression, the zones where they gather, the signals that give them away. I have learned to avoid eye contact, to move silently, to make myself smaller in a world that rewards aggression. Loneliness is a constant companion. I have survived by keeping my distance, but it comes at a cost. Nights are long, filled with memories that haunt me. I remember my family, the soft weight of my child's hand in mine, the smell of my partner's coffee in the morning, the sound of laughter bouncing off the walls of a home now reduced to dust. I see their faces in the shadows, hear their voices in the wind, and I know I will never see them again. Yet even amidst that despair, I hold on to fragments of hope. A stray radio signal, a glimmer of green in the ash, the faint echo of a laugh that belongs to someone else, somewhere out there. Hope is fragile, and it hurts to clutch it, but it keeps me alive. It is why I speak into the microphone, why I scavenge, why I risk the infected and other survivors alike. I have learned that survival is not just about keeping your body alive. It is about keeping your mind, your humanity, intact. The virus has made trust dangerous. I have seen neighbors turn on each other over a scrap of food. I have heard screams that began with arguments and ended in death. People I knew once, who smiled and waved, became something else entirely. Their eyes, once warm, once familiar, glow with a fire that is not human. It is not hatred. It is something worse, pure aggression, amplified by disease, stripped of reason or empathy. I avoid them at all costs, yet I am not immune to their influence. Tension of constant vigilance weighs on me like iron chains. Every encounter is a calculation of risk, every decision a balance between survival and morality. I have survived alone for so long that my senses have sharpened. I can hear the faintest movement in the rubble, smell the direction of smoke carried by the wind, feel the tremor of distant footsteps through the ground. I have become a shadow, a ghost in the ruins. Yet I am still human, or at least what remains of one. I am capable of kindness, capable of connection, capable of remembering who we were before the collapse. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind has died, I allow myself to dream. I dream of water flowing clean and cold, of communities that function, of children laughing without fear. These dreams are dangerous. They remind me of what was lost, but they also sustain me. They are reminders that the world was not always this way, and maybe, just maybe, it could be again. I have learned to record observations, taking notes in a tattered journal. I document weather patterns, viral flare-ups, locations of safe water, and encounters with other survivors. If someone ever reads this, they will understand the world as it became. These records are my attempt to preserve knowledge, to leave breadcrumbs for anyone who comes after me, even if I never meet them. Despite everything, I maintain small rituals. I clean my shelter meticulously. I keep my weapons sharpened. I prepare meals with care, even if it is only rice and scavenged vegetables. I listen to the radio every evening, tuning across frequencies in hopes of finding a voice like mine. I speak into it, knowing that someone out there might hear, might answer, might carry the same desire to live. The weight of the past and the present is heavy. Loss is constant. Hunger is constant. Fear is constant. Yet I endure. Every scar, every sleepless night, every encounter with death reminds me why survival matters. Not for glory, not for revenge, not for anything grand, but simply because living, even in this broken world, is the act of defiance against the collapse around me. I am Miles Harrington. I am a survivor. I am a voice in the void. I move through ruins. I dodge predators, both human and viral, and I carry memories of a world that no longer exists. I persist because there is still life somewhere out there, and because hope, however faint, is stronger than despair. Even in the quietest moments, when the wind carries the smell of ash and decay, I remind myself, I am still alive, and as long as I breathe, there is a chance that someone else is too. The crisis began quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it became undeniable. The rivers ran dry, the wells grew stagnant, and the earth itself cracked beneath the weight of relentless heat. At first, it was a drought like those recorded in history books, intense but survivable. Then the fires began, sweeping through forests, towns, and farmlands, fed by wind and neglect, leaving blackened skeletons where life had once thrived. I watched the landscape change day by day. What was once farmland now resembled desert, the soil so dry that even the hardiest weeds refused to grow. Roads melted into ribbons of tar that bubbled in the sun. The few rivers that remained were contaminated, carrying chemical runoff from factories that had been abandoned long before anyone thought survival would become a science of scavenging. Drinking water has become a calculation of risk. I filter, boil, and ration every drop, knowing a single mistake could bring fever or death. And then, the virus arrived. Aggression was its signature, a silent amplifier that transformed ordinary people into predators overnight. At first it was subtle, a neighbor snapping over a trivial dispute, a passerby screaming at shadows. By the time I realized what was happening, entire communities had collapsed under the weight of their own hostility. The virus doesn't merely infect, it awakens something primal, a pure, unreasoning aggression that is almost impossible to resist or reason with. Even those who are not infected are influenced by the tension, the constant threat, the suffocating fear. Survival has become a constant negotiation. Every step outside my shelter is a risk assessment. Are there infected nearby? Are there raiders? Are the elements themselves going to kill me before anyone else does? Even travel between towns has become a perilous venture. Roads that once took hours to traverse are now littered with abandoned vehicles, corpses, or scorch marks from fires. Dust storms sweep across the plains unpredictably, sometimes erasing tracks, sometimes carrying the virus in the fine particles that cling to skin and clothing. Encounters with other survivors are fraught with tension. I've met people who trade cautiously, offering food for information or water for directions. Some are more dangerous than the infected themselves, desperate humans whose moral compass has snapped under the weight of starvation and fear. I have learned to recognize the signs: a hand too eager, a smile too sharp, a hesitation that hides aggression. One wrong step, one moment of misplaced trust, and it could be my last. Fuel has become nearly non-existent. Vehicles are relics now, scavenged for parts rather than use. Generators run on kerosene or propane, and those supplies are dwindling faster than anyone can calculate. Each night, the hum of my small generator reminds me that even a source of power is temporary, fragile, and finite. I rely on solar panels scavenged from rooftops, but clouds, dust storms, and ash limit their effectiveness. Electricity has become a luxury, not a convenience. Food is scarce. I hunt small animals, scavenge canned goods from abandoned homes, and occasionally risk a longer expedition to reach a town rumored to have supplies. Every meal is rationed with precision. I have seen others die from desperation, eating spoiled food, drinking stagnant water, or succumbing to exhaustion after traveling too far. I calculate nutrition, hydration, and caloric expenditure like a scientist, because any misstep can tip the scale from survival to death. The virus complicates everything. Humans who might once have helped now pose a threat. Even a brief encounter can result in violence. One night I came across a small band of survivors huddled in a collapsed warehouse. They looked relieved to see me, but their eyes betrayed something else: hunger, fear, and the subtle influence of aggression. We exchanged cautious words. I left with only a fraction of their water supply, knowing that if I stayed longer, the tension could erupt into bloodshed. Severe weather is relentless. I have tracked storms for years, using broken barometers and scavenged thermometers, and yet they remain unpredictable. Thunderstorms roll in with no warning, lightning strikes ignite fires in dry forests miles away, and wind gusts can collapse weakened structures. Dust storms obscure vision for miles, reducing even familiar streets to a maze of jagged shadows. Extreme temperatures burn during the day and freeze at night, sapping strength and making simple tasks, like fetching water or tending to a trap, potentially lethal. Science, as I understand it, tells part of the story. The drought is fueled by climate extremes, unprecedented heat waves, shifting jet streams, and evaporation rates higher than rainfall. Fires are self-sustaining in some regions, creating microclimates of ash and heat that persist even after the initial blaze. The virus, meanwhile, seems to react to stress in human hosts, heightening aggression in those exposed to environmental strain. Crowded conditions, scarcity of food and water, and constant threat amplify its effects. It's a perfect storm of biology and climate, each factor feeding the other. Survival is becoming harder each day because the system is breaking down on every front. Water is contaminated, fires rage unpredictably, food supplies vanish, and the infected, human or viral, are everywhere. Even small mistakes have larger consequences now. A misjudged route can leave me stranded in a dust storm. A small wound can fester into infection. A moment of trust can end in death. The margin of error is razor thin, and I am constantly calculating, constantly watching, constantly waiting for the next disaster to unfold. I have learned strategies that make life possible, if never easy. Always travel with an escape route in mind. Check the wind before approaching a water source. Dust storms carry more than debris, they carry infection. Hunt early or late in the day when temperatures are lower and predators are less active. Never approach other survivors without a calculated distance. Always keep a hand on a weapon. When scavenging, move quietly, leave no trace, and avoid lingering. Every decision, however minor, can be the difference between life and death. Even my mental state has become a tool for survival. Panic is deadly. I practice control, forcing myself to think clearly even when adrenaline surges. Sleep is short and shallow, but I take it in cycles, always with one ear on the wind, one eye on the shadows. Memory becomes a map. Experience is a weapon. I calculate risk like a mathematician, but fear remains the constant gnawing companion, reminding me of the stakes. And yet, even in this relentless environment, the faintest sparks of hope persist. I hear rumors of safe zones, communities that have somehow survived the virus's wrath, or water sources untouched by the drought. Some may be true, some may be lies. But hope is a survival mechanism in itself. It drives me to keep moving, to keep scavenging, to keep broadcasting my voice into the static, hoping that someone else, someone sane, someone alive, is out there listening, surviving, hoping too. The crisis is not just environmental, it is psychological. Every day is a test of endurance, judgment, and willpower. Humans are the greatest threat now, more than fires, more than drought, more than storms. And the virus ensures that danger comes not just from strangers, but from those we once knew. The collapse of society is total, and the world feels like it is shrinking around me, forcing each of us to fight for scraps of survival in a landscape that seems determined to erase everything. Every step I take, every decision I make, is a calculation against the inevitable. Yet I persist, not because I am strong or brave or exceptional, but because I have no other choice. The crisis surrounds me, presses in on all sides, and yet I endure, moving through the chaos with one goal: to survive, to bear witness, and to keep the fragile thread of hope alive, even in a world gone mad. The days are growing longer in their cruelty. The sun barely rises above the ash-stained horizon before the heat begins to burn my skin. My water barrels are almost empty, and the rations that once carried me through weeks are now dwindling by the hour. Even my small generator sputters at the edges of exhaustion, a reminder that the fragile infrastructure I rely on is no longer dependable. I weigh every decision against the cost of survival: how far to walk, how much risk to take, how much of myself to expose. Yesterday, I found a small cache of canned beans in the ruins of a collapsed grocery store. The tins were dented, coated with ash, and the labels unreadable. Still, it was enough for 2 meals. I rationed it carefully, slicing the portions so that my body could stretch the energy across days. Every bite was a reminder of how much scarcity rules my existence now. I dream of water, clean water, flowing without threat, yet even the memory of a cool stream feels like a lie. It's not just the environment that presses down on me now. Raiders have grown bold. Groups of survivors who have abandoned all semblance of morality roam the open plains in makeshift vehicles, scavenging, threatening, and killing with little provocation. I've learned to avoid the highways entirely, choosing instead narrow, broken paths between towns. Even then, shadows can betray me. Just last week, a group spotted me while I scavenged an abandoned hardware store. I froze, waiting, heart hammering, calculating every second. They passed by with jeers and the roar of an engine, but I can still feel the threat lingering in the dust around me. Then, there are the infected. The virus doesn't sleep. Its influence spreads unpredictably, flaring in one survivor after another. I've witnessed families torn apart in seconds, friends attacking each other over water, food, or even nothing at all. I've learned the signs: the sudden twitch in an eye, the flare of aggression, the impossible rigidity of a posture. Avoidance is my primary weapon, but sometimes it isn't enough. There is a weight that comes with knowing that even if you survive today, tomorrow may be taken by something you cannot see coming. Amidst the danger, there are whispers, rumors that some haven't yet succumbed. Tales of a settlement far to the north, nestled in the remains of a mountain valley, where water flows, food is grown, and people are organized enough to survive. I hear them across broken radio frequencies, faint signals that cut in and out like mirages. I cannot tell whether they are true or mere stories to keep the desperate moving, but something in me, the same fragile hope that keeps me alive, clings to the possibility. I debate whether to pursue them. Every instinct tells me it is folly. The world outside my barricades is hostile and unpredictable. One wrong turn, one encounter with raiders, one misjudged dust storm, and I would be gone, swallowed by the ruins. And yet, the thought of a real refuge, a place where survival is not a daily gamble, is impossible to ignore. I begin mapping a potential route in my mind, piecing together the safest paths, noting rivers, abandoned towns, and forested areas that could conceal me. Even this mental exercise is dangerous. It consumes energy I can barely afford, but it is the only thing keeping me moving beyond mere survival. Last night, I recorded another transmission, my voice low and steady. If anyone is out there, keep moving, keep alive. There may be a place, a safe place, north of the old interstate, past the burned hills. I don't know if it's real, but if you're listening, it's worth the risk. Keep hope alive. The static crackled, masking my voice, but I spoke anyway. Someone, somewhere, might hear me. I cling to that possibility like a lifeline. The environmental collapse is relentless. Ash falls from the sky in thick sheets, coating my shelter and every surface in a fine, choking powder. The wind carries it into my lungs despite the makeshift masks I've constructed from fabric. Fires rage in the distance, consuming forests and brush, sending smoke hundreds of miles, reducing visibility to near zero. Temperature extremes dominate every day. Unbearable heat under the sun, frost that bites through thin clothing at night. I monitor these changes obsessively, noting wind direction, humidity, and temperature, because understanding the patterns is the only way I can survive. Resources are more scarce than ever. My generator runs on nearly empty fuel cans. Each night, I weigh the decision to turn it on for warmth and light against conserving what little kerosene I have. Food supplies are equally dire. I hunt small mammals and trap birds, but the hunting grounds are shrinking. The virus has reduced human cooperation, making shared hunting or gathering almost impossible. Every meal is a gamble, and every day is a negotiation with the laws of physics, biology, and human desperation. Trust has become a luxury I cannot afford. Every person I encounter presents risk. A trading partner could be cooperative, or they could be infected. Even those who appear sane can turn on you in moments of weakness or desperation. I met a woman scavenging near a collapsed school last week. She claimed to have found a hidden cache of water and supplies. Her story seemed believable, but her eyes betrayed a different motive. I left without confrontation, taking only what I could carry and leaving the rest. I survived through caution, observation, and constant vigilance. There is an internal struggle, too. I wonder whether my hope is foolish. Perhaps the settlement to the north does not exist. Perhaps it is merely a story, a cruel joke whispered through the static of old radio signals. Yet the thought of it keeps me moving. Without hope, I would collapse into despair. Hope is the one resource that cannot be measured, rationed, or scavenged, but it sustains me more than any water or food ever could. I have started leaving subtle markers along my route. small symbols etched into walls, rocks stacked in patterns, so that if anyone follows the same path, they might know it is possible to survive. It is an instinct that borders on madness, exposing me to potential danger, but I cannot ignore the need to leave breadcrumbs. I am aware that each marker could be discovered by raiders or infected, but it is a risk I am willing to take. There is a tension between self-preservation and the faint desire to communicate, to connect, to leave something behind. The nights bring no relief. Wind howls through the broken buildings, carrying the scent of ash, death, and distant fires. Every creak, groan, or whisper of movement sets my heart racing. Sleep is shallow and punctuated by nightmares of collapsing buildings, attacks, and loved ones lost. I wake with my body tense, my mind racing through possible routes, contingencies, and escape plans. Fatigue is a constant enemy, and yet I push forward, knowing that inaction is death. In the distance, I sometimes see lights, flickers on the horizon that could be other survivors, fires, or hallucinations brought on by exhaustion and isolation. I record these observations, marking them on my mental map, weighing the probability of danger against the possibility of human contact. Some nights I venture closer, other nights I retreat. Every decision is a calculus of survival. Amid this tension, a new mystery emerges. Rumors speak of a technology, hidden and functional, somewhere beyond the burned-out suburbs. A solar array that could provide energy, a clean water system untouched by contamination, a storage facility with food sufficient to sustain dozens. I do not know if these rumors are real, but I cannot ignore them. The thought of such a resource is intoxicating, even dangerous, because it could change everything. It could mean trust, cooperation, and a future beyond mere survival. Or it could be a trap, designed to lure the desperate into death. I have begun to consider alliances carefully, tentatively. Even I, hardened by months of solitude, know that some challenges are impossible alone. Yet the virus has made trust a lethal gamble. I calculate every interaction, every potential ally, with the precision of a scientist weighing probabilities. I must discern sanity from madness, cooperation from aggression, truth from illusion. The tension builds as the world itself grows more hostile. Dust storms sweep across the plains unpredictably, fires rage without warning, and temperatures swing between extremes that sap strength and morale. The virus continues its invisible work, heightening aggression, tearing apart the fragile remnants of humanity. My food dwindles, water is scarce, and fuel is almost gone. Every day is a negotiation between caution and necessity, survival and curiosity, fear and hope. Yet I move forward. The settlement to the north, the rumors of hidden technology, the faint flickers of human life, these are my compass, my reason to push on. I cannot ignore the possibility of salvation, even when the world itself conspires to crush me. And so I continue, scavenging, observing, hiding, and hoping, aware that each step might be my last, yet determined to see what lies beyond the horizon. The rising action is relentless. The environment worsens, human threats multiply, resources dwindle, and the mystery, whether real or imagined, beckons with the promise of survival or the risk of death. Every choice matters, every second counts, every breath is a gamble. But I endure, because even when the world seems bent on ending me, I cling to hope. Even when every signal fades into static, I speak. Even when every path is dangerous, I move forward. I had been traveling for days, each step heavier than the last, my supplies dwindling to nothing. My water bottle was empty, my food long gone, and the generator at my shelter had sputtered to silence hours ago. Dust clung to my skin, my clothes, even my thoughts, and yet the faint rumor of the northern settlement kept me moving. It was the only thread left that tethered me to life, the only reason I had not surrendered to the quiet despair of this broken world. The landscape changed as I approached the mountains. The ash plains gradually gave way to scrubland, dotted with gnarled trees and rock formations that jutted like the teeth of some long-dead creature. Fires had scorched the lower ridges, but here, higher up, the air smelled less of smoke and more of possibility, cold, crisp, and faintly sweet. My heart surged with a mixture of hope and fear. I knew that what lay ahead could save me or destroy me. The first sign was the faint glimmer of water, a stream running clear despite the drought that had consumed the rivers below. I crouched on the edge, dipping my hands in cautiously, letting the cold water run over my parched skin. I drank until my stomach protested, every swallow a mixture of relief and disbelief. Could it be real? Could this oasis, hidden and untouched, actually exist? Then I heard movement. Not the whisper of wind, not the distant crack of a dying tree, but voices, human voices. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. The virus had taught me that even a moment of hesitation could be deadly. Slowly, carefully, I crept closer, hiding behind a rock as I observed. A small community had taken root along the stream. A handful of makeshift huts, small gardens irrigated by the water, and people moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in years. They carried tools, harvested crops, and laughed quietly, cautiously, as if the act of being alive required permission. My breath caught. Life, real life, had survived. I considered approaching, but caution screamed in my ears. I didn't know if these people were infected, or if they were the kind of survivors who had grown brutal from isolation. I watched for hours, letting the sun dip low behind the mountains, painting the valley in orange and purple until it was safe to move under the cover of twilight. I emerged from the shadows, calling out softly, carefully, introducing myself. The closest person froze, eyes scanning me as if I were prey. I raised my hands, showing no weapon, no threat. "I'm alone," I said, voice steady but low. "I'm just looking to survive. Maybe help if I can." A man stepped forward, older, lean, with eyes that held both suspicion and wisdom. "Survival alone brings more danger than you can imagine," he said. "But if you're willing to follow the rules, we can offer safety. For now." The relief was immediate but tempered by fear. I had learned over months of wandering that safety is temporary, trust is fragile, and hope is dangerous. I followed him to the edge of the camp, where the stream widened into a small pool surrounded by cultivated land. Gardens, a water filtration system scavenged and repaired, and structures that seemed almost permanent. For the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to believe survival might be more than endurance. It might be possible life. But the world outside this valley was still waiting. A storm was coming, and I could see it on the horizon long before the first clouds rolled in. A black wall of dust and ash carried by wind that had picked up speed. The temperature dropped suddenly, the air buzzing with static electricity, the sky painted in unnatural hues. This storm could obliterate anything in its path. The valley offered some protection, but I knew it would not be enough if the winds shifted. I had a choice. I could retreat, return to the familiar ruins, and survive alone as I always had. Or I could stay, risk everything, and protect this fragile pocket of life, this community that had somehow resisted the collapse, the virus, the drought. My instincts screamed for self-preservation, but my heart, battered by months of isolation, told me otherwise. The storm hit with sudden ferocity. Dust and ash whipped through the trees, tearing at the huts, threatening to tear the soil from the roots of the crops. I ran, helping to reinforce walls, drag water barrels to shelter, and calm panicked residents. The virus did not wait. It flared in two of the younger members, amplifying fear and aggression. I had to act quickly, separating them, isolating them, administering rudimentary treatment learned from months of experience. One wrong move, and it could have been deadly for all of us. I realized, in the chaos, that leadership is a choice, not a birthright. Survival is not only about protecting oneself, it is about guiding, defending, and making decisions that could cost you everything. I made the hard calls. Who could be moved to shelter? Who needed constant monitoring? How to ration water when it seemed certain that the storm would destroy part of our supply. Each decision weighed on me, but hesitation would have been fatal. As night fell, the storm intensified. Winds roared, sand and ash shredded through makeshift defenses, and the sky was lit intermittently by lightning, illuminating the faces of people who had never known true security until now. I felt every gust as if it struck me personally, every scream a reminder of the fragility of life. I thought of my family, lost in a world like this, and the ghosts of the past pressed against me, urging me not to fail these people. Hours passed in a blur of motion, shouting, and tension. By the time the storm began to abate, I was soaked, exhausted, and bleeding from minor cuts. But the valley had survived. The gardens remained partially intact, the stream was still flowing, and the people, though shaken, were alive. I collapsed against a rock, every muscle trembling, and allowed myself a single, ragged breath of relief. And yet, even in victory, I faced another choice. The settlement could provide safety, but only if I remained vigilant. If I failed to maintain the defenses, if I allowed the virus or another storm to breach the perimeter, everything would be lost. I realized that my journey had led me here not to escape danger, but to accept responsibility for survival, not just mine, but for others as well. In the quiet that followed, I reflected on the months of wandering, the constant tension, the scarcity, the fear. All of it had prepared me for this moment. I understood now that survival is more than food, water, or shelter. It is courage, resilience, and the willingness to face impossible choices. I had been alone for so long that I forgot how to connect, how to act for others, how to hope beyond myself. This was the reckoning. By dawn, the storm was gone, leaving ash-laden air, broken branches, and a sky that seemed impossibly pale after the night's fury. I walked along the stream, helping to salvage what remained, and for the first time in months, I felt a small spark of pride. Not for myself, but for the people around me, for the lives that continued despite the chaos. I realized that survival is no longer solitary. It is collective. To endure, we must protect each other, guide each other, and, when necessary, sacrifice for one another. And yet, even as relief settled in, I knew the world beyond the valley was unchanged. Fires raged, raiders prowled, and the virus lurked, waiting to tear apart any moment of peace. The settlement was not a final solution. It was a fragile bastion in a world still bent on destruction. But it was enough. For now, it was enough to survive, to hope, and to rebuild, if only in small increments. That night, I spoke into the radio again, my voice hoarse but steady. If anyone is out there, there is life beyond the ash. There is hope, if you're willing to find it. Keep moving, keep surviving. We are still here. Static swallowed some of my words, but I did not care. Someone would hear, someone might follow, and for the first time in months, I believed survival was not just endurance, it could be life. In the turning point of the storm, I realized that the apocalypse had forced me to choose constantly between fear and courage, despair and hope, isolation and connection. In the valley, I chose hope. And in that choice, I found that survival is not just about outlasting the world. It is about claiming moments of life, even when the world seems determined to end them. The storm had passed, leaving the valley battered but intact. I walked through the remnants of the night's fury, brushing ash from the plants and clearing broken branches from paths that had once been orderly. The people I had helped protect emerged cautiously, faces smeared with soot and fatigue, yet alive. Their eyes searched mine, silently asking, "What now?" I didn't have answers, only the hard-earned knowledge that survival required constant vigilance, even in moments of apparent peace. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to pause. I sat on the edge of the stream, watching the water ripple past, carrying with it ash, leaves, and tiny remnants of the storm. It was still clean, still flowing, a small miracle in a world that had long forgotten such things. I dipped my hands in, letting the cold liquid wash over my skin, and for a moment, I felt a strange sense of normalcy, a fleeting illusion that life could still hold softness and beauty. The settlement was quiet, the usual hum of activity muted by exhaustion. I walked among the huts, noting the damage, a torn tarp over a garden, a few collapsed fences, and the footprints of creatures that had sought shelter during the storm. But despite the devastation, there was order, a rhythm to the recovery. People worked without complaint, moving supplies, repairing structures, and tending the wounded. There was no panic, no chaos, just resilience. I thought back to the months of wandering, the empty streets of abandoned towns, the burned-out highways, the relentless pursuit of water and food. Everything had led to this moment. The valley had survived because someone had made the choice to act, to risk everything for others. And in that choice, I recognized the transformation within myself. Fear still lingered, but it had shifted. Now it existed alongside purpose, responsibility, and the faintest thread of hope. Hope was fragile here. I knew that as much as I wanted to believe in safety, the world beyond the valley remained unforgiving. Raiders prowled, the virus persisted, and the environment continued its slow, relentless assault. But within this small pocket, life had taken hold again. I watched a young boy play near the stream, splashing water with laughter that felt foreign yet profoundly moving. I realized that life does not wait for perfection. It survives in spite of imperfection, in spite of danger, in spite of despair. As I helped repair a collapsed hut, I reflected on my past decisions. Each choice, from the paths I had taken to the people I had avoided or helped, had led me here. I understood now that survival was never just about me. It was about the ripple effect of my actions, the consequences of inaction, and the courage to act when every instinct screamed otherwise. I had learned that isolation is a temporary shield, but connection, however risky, is what makes survival meaningful. The environment, too, seemed to respond in its small, stubborn ways. Rain had begun to fall lightly, washing the ash from the leaves and soil. Tiny sprouts pushed through the scorched earth, delicate yet determined. Birds returned to the trees, cautiously, as if testing the safety of the valley. It was a slow, uneven recovery, but it was real. Nature, like humanity, had a stubbornness that could not be extinguished entirely. I spent hours walking the perimeter, checking the water, the gardens, and the makeshift defenses. Each step reminded me of the fragile balance between life and death, security and vulnerability. Even in the aftermath, the threat was palpable. Yet for the first time, I felt a measure of confidence. The storm had tested us, and we had endured. That endurance was proof, not that the world had changed, but that we had adapted, survived, and perhaps even grown stronger. The community itself began to shift in subtle ways. Cooperation replaced suspicion. Cautious trust blossomed into tentative friendship, and the act of working together to rebuild forged bonds that had seemed impossible months ago. I found myself teaching, guiding, and mentoring, sharing the hard-won knowledge of survival, how to ration water, how to spot early signs of aggression from the virus, how to repair structures with limited resources. In doing so, I realized that my purpose extended beyond mere survival. It was about sustaining life, hope, and knowledge for others. There were losses, too, stark reminders that the apocalypse had not relented its cruelty. Some who had been injured during the storm would not recover. Others had been lost long before, and their absence was a shadow that lingered over the valley. I honored them in quiet ways, marking small memorials near the stream or leaving words of remembrance on walls. Survival did not erase grief. It coexisted with it, shaping every decision, every step, every thought. As night fell, I sat again by the stream, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a bird. The valley was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to imagine the future. Perhaps we could expand, cultivate more land, create a network of safe havens. Perhaps we could find others who had survived, integrate them into this fragile oasis, and rebuild a semblance of civilization. It was a dream, yes, but a tangible one now. The possibility was real because we had endured. I spoke into the radio once more, voice low and deliberate. To anyone out there, if you are listening, there is life beyond the ash. There is hope, small and fragile, but it exists. Find it, protect it, keep moving, keep surviving. The static crackled, but this time I felt no desperation. My words were not a plea, they were a promise. The valley was proof that survival was possible, and with it, the chance to rebuild. The aftermath of the storm had changed me. I was no longer simply a lone survivor wandering through ruins. I was part of something larger, a protector of fragile life, a guide for those still struggling to exist. My fears remained, but they were tempered by purpose. I had learned that the apocalypse was not merely a force to endure. It was a test of courage, resilience, and the human capacity to adapt and hope. Even as the world beyond remained harsh and unpredictable, the valley offered a glimpse of what could be reclaimed. Nature, battered and scorched, was beginning its slow healing. Humanity, fractured and fearful, was rediscovering its capacity for cooperation. And I, once alone and adrift, had found a place where my presence mattered, where my choices could ripple outward, preserving life, hope, and the possibility of a future. The night deepened, and I stayed awake by the stream, listening to the quiet, counting the stars through a haze of lingering ash. The world had not been reset. It had not healed entirely. But in this valley, battered and scarred as it was, life had persevered. The storm had tested us, nearly broken us, but we had endured. And that endurance, fragile and unsteady as it might be, was proof that hope could survive even in the darkest corners of a shattered world. I realized that survival was no longer just about avoiding death. It was about cultivating life wherever possible. Every garden planted, every structure rebuilt, every person helped or healed became a small victory, a defiance of the apocalypse that threatened to consume everything. And with each victory, no matter how small, I felt the ember of hope grow just a little stronger, flickering in the wind, but refusing to die. I sat there long into the night, staring at the stream, the stars, the faces of those who had survived the storm with me. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe, not blindly, not foolishly, but with careful, deliberate acknowledgement that life could continue, that humanity could endure, that perhaps, just perhaps, the world, though broken, might still offer moments of beauty, connection, and hope. The valley was quiet now, the storm a memory etched into the ash-laden soil and the faces of those who had endured it. I walked among the remnants of makeshift defenses, inspecting the repairs we had managed to complete. Each step felt heavy with responsibility, but lighter with the faint weight of hope. Survival was no longer a solitary struggle. It was a shared burden, a chain of effort linking each of us to the other. I looked at the stream, its water sparkling faintly in the dim morning light, and I thought of the countless rivers, lakes, and wells that had gone dry in the months and years prior. It was a small victory, yes, but enough to remind me that life could endure, even in places where destruction had ruled for so long. I traced the edge of the water with my fingers, feeling its cold resilience seep into my bones. There was a lesson in that. Persistence matters. Even the smallest trickle, unassuming yet steady, can carve a path through stone. The community was beginning to find its rhythm. Children played cautiously, under watchful eyes, learning the ways of survival through laughter and games that mimicked work. Adults tended to gardens, reinforced huts, and shared stories of what had been lost and what had been preserved. I joined them when I could, offering guidance on what I had learned, but also listening, learning from them. I realized that survival was now about more than rules or routines. It was about connection, trust, and nurturing life where it still existed. Yet, even amidst the fragile sense of normalcy, I could not ignore the larger world outside the valley. The ash plains, the burned forests, the empty cities, they remained. The virus lingered, a shadow in every corner. Raiders still prowled the peripheries, seeking easy prey. Nature had begun to heal in small pockets, but the wounds were deep, and the scars were long. The apocalypse had not relented its grip. It had simply shifted, revealing new challenges that would demand vigilance and courage in equal measure. I thought about the months I had spent wandering alone, the countless moments of despair when survival seemed a matter of luck rather than skill or determination. The memories were sharp and bitter, yet they now served a purpose. They reminded me that hope is never accidental. It is earned, cultivated, and protected. The small victories of the valley were proof that humanity could endure, but they also reminded me that vigilance was constant, that survival is never a final destination, only a continuous effort. One evening, I climbed a ridge overlooking the valley, the sky painted in the muted colors of a fading sun. From there, I could see the settlements of tents, huts, and gardens sprawled below, and I allowed myself a rare moment of pride. Not for myself alone, but for what we had preserved together. The wind carried a faint scent of rain, distant and uncertain, yet enough to stir a whisper of optimism in my chest. Life, I realized, was stubborn. It would push forward in spite of everything, just as we must. I returned to the stream, joining a small group as they filtered water and tended the soil. Conversations were cautious, yet full of curiosity and care. People asked questions about the outside world, about survival tactics, and about the strange figure who had arrived months ago, weary, ragged, but unbroken. I answered as honestly as I could, balancing truth with encouragement. Fear remained, yes, but it had a new companion now: resolve. At night, I spoke into the radio once more, my voice low and steady, carrying across the static. If you are listening, know this: life persists. Hope exists, even if it is fragile, even if it flickers in the wind. Keep moving, keep surviving. Look for the streams, the gardens, the places where life refuses to yield. You are not alone. I paused, listening to the crackle, imagining the distant survivors tuning in. Somewhere, someone would hear these words, and perhaps it would ignite the smallest ember of courage within them. I understood now that survival was not about certainty. There was no promise of safety, no guarantee that the world would grow kinder or that tomorrow would bring ease. But survival was about choosing to act in the face of uncertainty, about cultivating life where it could exist, about preserving connection, trust, and purpose, even in a world determined to crush it. Each day was a small victory, each meal shared, each garden tended, each life protected. These were the markers of persistence. And I had learned that hope, though fragile, is resilient when nurtured. The children playing near the stream, the adults rebuilding their shelters, the flow of water that refused to stop even when the world seemed empty, they were all reminders that life does not surrender easily. Neither should we. The apocalypse may have reduced us to bare survival, but it cannot erase our capacity for courage, care, and the slow, patient work of rebuilding. As I lay beneath the stars that night, the ash swirling lightly in the cool breeze, I reflected on everything that had brought me here: the loneliness, the fear, the loss, the relentless challenges. Each moment had shaped me, honed me, and prepared me for this fragile, precious equilibrium. I realize that survival is a chain, each link a choice, each act of courage or care strengthening it. To endure is to participate in that chain, to bear responsibility not only for oneself, but for the life around you. I don't know what tomorrow holds. There will be storms, both literal and figurative. There will be scarcity, conflict, and the relentless trials of a broken world. But for today, we have water, we have food, we have each other. For today, life continues. And in that continuation, there is hope, a quiet, persistent flame that refuses to be snuffed out. I whispered into the night, a message for any who might listen, for any who might follow. Stay alive. Protect life wherever you find it. Value hope, even when it feels small and uncertain. The world may be broken, but as long as we breathe, we can still fight, we can still care, we can still endure. Hope is fragile, yes, but it exists. And for now, that is enough. Enough to plant another seed, to dig another trench, to tend another life. Enough to keep moving forward, step by step, toward a future that, though uncertain, is still worth striving for. The apocalypse has taken much from me, friends, family, certainty, comfort, but it has not taken my resolve. And as I sit by the stream, listening to the gentle flow of water, the faint laughter of children, and the quiet determination of those around me, I understand. Survival is not merely the act of living. Survival is the choice to continue, to protect, and to nurture hope, even when the world has given us every reason not to. And as long as I am here, as long as the stream runs and the gardens grow, I will keep choosing life, keep fostering hope, and keep speaking into the darkness, knowing that even a single spark can ignite a fire. We are alive, we endure, and for today, that is enough.